white tiger, and then like my parents put me in like a really pretty dress. So I got pictures.
Okay, we're good?
Yep.
Okay, so I chose a cancer drug known as Rituxan. Okay, so its name is Rituxan, and the chemical formula of Rituxan is C6416, H1874, N1688, O1987, S44. So as you can tell,
You didn't want to do molecular weight on that.
pretty big. Actually, I know the molecular weight, I just didn't write it. The molecular weight is...
It's in kilodaltons.
Yeah, but if it's in grams per mole, it's like 140,000 something. So it's pretty big. So what it is, it's a genetically altered monoclonal antibody that hinders the growth of cancer. And so monoclonal antibodies are also known as immunoglobulins, and they're produced by like a single clone of cells or a single line of cells, and through cellular replication, that's how they're created. And then the chemical structure, so this is like the generic like, Rituxan antibody structure. And so antibodies have like a generic like, Y shape. And Rituxan is different from other antibodies because it's a chimeric antibody, which is created by fusing like the antigen binding region from one species with the constant region from another species. And so the two arms of the Y shape are where the antigens are bound to the viral regions. So the purpose of an antibody is your body creates them, and whenever a foreign invader comes into your body, and your antibodies are pretty much created to attack them, to like keep you safe. And then the variable regions are integral for antigen binding, as they bind in a lock and key mechanism with the respective antigen. And something I found interesting was that antibodies are all different from each other, even though they have like a generic Y shape. There's always something different on this section of it usually, and based on how it's different from each other, they attack certain cells in your body. And then this is just like an X-ray crystal structure of the antibody, and so it shows up the domains of the antibodies. And so you have your heavy chains, which are the red and the blue, and then your light chains are the green and the yellow, and your heavy chains are the base of your antibody, while the light chains are what differentiates each antibody from each other. So the light chains are what's different in each antibody. And then, in other words, the light chains are created to determine the specific antigen it will bind to and eventually kill. And then, so the main purpose of rituximab is it treats non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it also treats lymphocytic leukemia. And then in the past, mustard gas was actually used to kill off lymphocytes, and this was like World War II era. And so they found that whenever soldiers who had cancer were exposed to mustard gas in the war, they had like a reduction of lymphocytes. And so they started to administer the poison. And so, but however, like scientists quickly discovered the repercussions of the poison within a couple. I think it was like 2 months of like using like prescribing it. They were like, oh wait, this is killing people. So then they began to create like newer drugs. And then the pharmacodynamics. So the definition is like the effect that drugs have on the body. And so when treating non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, administration of Rituxan resulted in the reduction of B cells. So Rituxan is a specific antibody which targets the CD20 antigen on B cells. And so, in addition, 83% of patients retain depletion of B cells for up to 9 months after treatment, and 14% of patients had IgM and IgG serum levels below the normal range. And the IgM and IgG are immunoglobulins, or like proteins found in human blood that contain antibodies that like fend off like pathogens that come into your body. And then for the pharmacokinetics, the definition was the study of the way in which drugs move through the body during absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So in the study including 299 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma patients who received rituximab weekly or once every 3 weeks, the destruction half-life was about 22 days. And then patients with higher CD20 positive cell counts had a greater clearance rate. And then gender and age didn't have an effect on the pharmacokinetics of rituximab. And then, okay, so just explaining how antibodies work. So they're created when the body recognizes a certain antigen, and then a toxin or a foreign substance, and then it works to attack them and eventually kill it. So it attaches, the antibodies attach themselves to the antigen in order to earmark it, and then it allows the immune system to destroy the antigen. So rituximab in particular, it has like FC receptors, which are fragmented crystallizable receptors, which are proteins on effector cells, and they bind to the FC region, which is like the bottom portion of like the Y shape of the antibody, and they bind with those and to the B cells, which have the like the toxin on it. And so then afterward, phosphorylation occurs, which is where the FCGR chain is introduced to a phosphate group, and then this introduces apoptosis, which is when the cell is like killed, and it leads to the depletion of B cells, which creates a new population of healthy B cells. So I also found it interesting that while rituximab, like its goal is to kill off the CD20 antigen, CD20 can be found on the drug doesn't necessarily just attack B cells that have the antigen on it. So rituximab ends up earmarking and attacking all B cells, but because it's getting rid of the malignant toxin, it allows for like new healthy B cells to be produced.
So this attacks not the cancer directly?
From what I researched, it attacks the CD20 B cells, but it also attacks other B cells as well. But like through the process somehow, it also allows like new B cells to be created.
But I mean, B cells are not your tumor.
Tumor, right.
So how does it affect your tumor?
I'm not necessarily sure, actually.
Okay.
And then Rituxan is administered through the bloodstream, so it's given as an infusion. And the infusion usually takes about 48 hours to get, and it's like given through the vein. And so it's usually administered. So when it's first administered, you get it, and then it's administered again after 2 weeks. And then if you need it again after 6 months, then they administer it. But it's like a long period of time.
What's the difference between an infusion and an injection?
Infusion.
What's the difference between?
I'm not sure actually.
You say it's given into the bloodstream, but it's not an injection. I don't know what an infusion is.
From what I saw online, it's like just like a needle being put into your arm. I'm not exactly sure how it is different.
Did they put it like where?
Like it's intramuscular instead?
It's supposed to be a vein. That's all I read.
Okay,
It's
but
like
that's in the bloodstream. So, but they must have made a distinction. So I wasn't sure if maybe there was an obvious difference between
I'm
the
not
two.
sure. And then last, the side effects include headaches, fever, chills, nausea, and then heartburn, and then like pretty much just like fatigue and dizziness. And then a serious but rare side effect is the possibility of a reaction from the infusion, but it doesn't occur often. But then clinical studies have shown that not all patients experience these side effects, but some do. And then, lastly, the effect of the medical field, it's helped treat cancer dramatically, and the success of rituximab in treating cancer has created a lot of interest in creating new monoclonal antibodies, because it seems to be working. My dad's an oncologist, and he says that oncologists use this drug all the time because it's I don't know, it's pretty effective. And that's it.
Did you see any numbers on how many of this type of protein drug are out there? It's obviously isn't the only one, but did you see any other ones?
I'm not sure. I don't know actually.
Because you're right. This is us being able to tailor proteins is a huge step forward for us as a species. Because eventually, if we can make catalysts, all the things we do in our lives become 1 trillion times more efficient. So in doing things in medicine like this is where the forefront of sort of tailoring proteins is occurring. So this is a really cool thing that we're being able to do, And at this point, we're taking away from the mechanisms that are already in place in these cells that we find outside of our own creation. But ultimately, I think we will get to a point where we can create catalysts and things, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be a while because that's such a big deal. But. Questions? Other questions?
How recent is this?
I think Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know. I feel like I remember reading it was like towards the later like half of the 20th century, but I'm pretty sure maybe 1990s. I'm not sure, like not completely sure.
Well, I mean, is there a generic version?
I
If you didn't read about a generic version, it's probably within the last 20 years.
yeah. Okay, then probably yeah. I would say late 1990s.
I would say probably
Early?
maybe, I bet it was even in the 2000s.
Oh, 2000s. Okay.
I mean, they haven't been doing protein therapies for that long,
Okay.
especially not for cancer. But yeah, I don't know either. We can look that up.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. I guess you kind of already answered this, but is it the most common cancer drug prescribed for like lymphoma?
When I researched it like online like sources says that it's like used pretty frequently.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's the most,
Uh-huh.
but it's one of the top drugs
Yeah.
used because it's known to be more effective than other ones.
Okay.
And I from our research, like I talked to my dad about it, and he says that like this drug doesn't seem to cause as many side effects
Yeah.
as other drugs do,
Mhm.
and so it's easier for patients to like to be administered to these drugs.
Well, because it has a wide, or as a more narrow target. It's
Right.
not like a lot of cancer drugs which treat these 15 types of cancer.
Yeah.
It's literally for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and there was one other
It was
one,
like
right?
leukemia, yeah.
And a certain type
That's
of
it, yeah.
leukemia. So, yeah, proteins are very specific, and that's one of the nice things about them. They're harder to make, but they're also very targeted. So unless we have something very specific that this hits
Yeah.
in our bodies, that's sort of a really good thing, so.